Cassis had been led to the tram by Stahl and Junko as they traveled through the retribution, and he knew he should be focused on the prince, but what he'd just learned about Andromeda was at the forefront of his mind. So, she was only survivor of dead ship. Born in void, he said carefully as he tried his English out. He saw the dark human nod in agreement. There were times when he had trouble remembering the human captain named Stahl had skin colored that way naturally. It still seemed so strange to him. But the other humans didn't seem to think anything of it, so he figured it was just part of his trouble adapting to human culture. Yes. The human replied, but after that he spoke a bit fast and Cassis heard him say something about seeing the ship, but he couldn't quite understand, and looked at Junko. He said you can see the ship for yourself if you like. She translated and Cassis blinked, brows furrowing in confusion. It's here on the ship. Somewhere. I'd have to check the logs to remember where she put it. But before leaving the Confederate capital, she took a number of artifacts with her, including the wreck of the Gypsy. She brought the ship that her mother died on? The ship she was born on? It's on the Retribution? He asked, wanting to make very clear what she said. As Junko nodded, he straightened up a bit and just thought over the implications. It was beginning to seem to him that the pirate's madness was just a reaction to her environment. In the few stories he knew of Desvians being born in the void, and certainly in better circumstances than her birth, they always went mad. Completely mad. Not just Andromeda's select form of it. However, as he thought about that, he realized they were just stories. And old ones. He had never seen it himself. The old stories said everyone beyond the nebula was also mad, but he looked at Junko and couldn't think of her being mad. Though perhaps she was the exception to prove the madness of the rest of her species. He looked back at the human officer Stahl. He didn't seem mad either, though. He couldn't help but let out a little sigh as he tried to cope with his continually assaulted perception of the universe. I'm quite surprised that this vault lasted so long without being opened, Junko was saying. I didn't expect him to have so much food or water in there. It was quite well stocked. Cassis nodded then. It was made to hold several people. Since the prince was in there on his own, it likely improved his longevity. Not to mention you kept it in a place with atmosphere so it didn't need to drain its own air supply. Ah, she said with a nod as she better understood. Are you excited to see him? When she asked that, he looked over at her with a frown. It seemed like such an odd question to him. But when he saw her smile, he softened his expression. Being a captive wasn't supposed to be an easy thing, and he was adjusting as best he could. But he still considered himself a captive. He forgot at times that this was Junko's life. It didn't seem unusual to her for captives to be excited to see other people captured by Andromeda. I'm not exactly looking forward to it, no, he answered. I'm in a garment used by your staff. Not my uniform, not even Desvian clothing. I don't feel or look like the man I'm supposed to be. And it will be my duty to explain to him what's going on, and how his rescue isn't imminent, or perhaps unlikely altogether. This man whom I had sworn my life to protect. Oh, Junko said quietly, her smile fading as his answer seemed to remind her of their shared situation. After that, they were left in silence as the tram took them along the spine of the ship. Cassis noticed the human officer Stahl watching him. Cassis assumed he was curious what Junko had talked to him about, but he didn't have nearly the English vocabulary needed to explain. When the tram stopped, he stood up, moving to the exit with the other two. It wasn't until the door opened, and he saw one of the massive armored humans that made up Andromeda's personal guard, that he realized he hadn't had an armed escort to this point. Were they already trusting him to behave himself? He wasn't sure if that spoke well or poorly of his behavior as a prisoner of war. Was he even a prisoner of war? He was being treated as such, yet he never hesitated to call Andromeda and her crew. Pirates didn't have the same rules as nations, and if the kingdom ever took pirates prisoner, it certainly didn't treat them with the same respect as prisoners of war. Mostly they were only prionsers long enough for the gallows to be prepared. Either way, he walked along with Junko, Stahl, and now their heavily armed escort behind him as they walked into the room where the vault was being held. It wasn't a space he'd seen before, which wasn't uncommon on a ship this size, but rather it was a type of room he hadn't seen before. It looked like some sort of workshop, but as with everything human he'd seen, it lacked an artistic nature and was very sparse and utilitarian. What had Junko called it? Spartan, He'd have to remember to ask her who this architect was and why he had such boring designs. In the center of the room was the secure vault that had once been in the heart of his ship. It was perhaps fitting that Andromeda had ripped it out and brought it with her as she'd brought Cassus himself. Andromeda and her guard were spaced out around the room, along with a number of mechanics. The door was only very slightly cracked open, some mechanical arm at the top wedged into it to prevent it from closing. "There you are." Andromeda turned as they approached, speaking to Cassus directly. He opened the door for a moment, but tried to shut it again right away. "We can try to pry it open, but he said he'll kill himself if we do. You talk to him." Cassus nodded and walked up to the vault door then, getting in close so he could try to speak through the gap. "Your Royal Highness?" He didn't hear anything. "Prince Thulime?" "Captain Devoros, is that you?" he heard the prince ask. "Yes, it's me. They wanted me to talk to you." "You're still alive? They didn't eat you or skin you alive and turn you into a pelt?" the prince asked, and Cassus let out a soft chuckle. No. I'm very much alive. Aside from a bruised snout and a black eye, I was all right when I regained consciousness after the fight," he informed the prince. "Can you let me in so we can talk?" Tell the pirates that I'll open the door a little to let you in, but that's it. And then they have to let me close it again, or else I'll kill myself right now." Cassus turned to look at Andromeda and jerked a bit in surprise when he discovered she was right behind him. "That's fine," she said simply and backed up. That's fine, they say," Cassus informed the prince. There was a pause then as the door creaked open slowly. The arm holding it shut lifted up out of the way, and Cassus looked over his shoulder at Andromeda, who in turn waved him forward. With a shrug, then he stepped forward, climbing up into the chamber as the door sealed behind him. He couldn't see the prince right away, but noticed the mess around the vault. As the door closed behind him, however, the smell finally hit him. "Ugh, what is that smell?" he asked, wincing and shaking his head as if to try and clear the smell from his nose. "Oh, I suppose it might smell a bit in here. Not like there's a shower," he heard the prince say as he looked up and saw him step around the bulkhead at the back of the vault. In his hand was a knife, but it looked to Cassus to be a butter knife. "Is that what you were going to use to kill yourself?" he asked as he looked around the place more closely now. There was a table in the center, some chairs in the kitchen area. But it was all a mess. Packets of food had been tossed about and left to rot, it seemed, wherever they landed. The prince looked quite filthy as well, and was wearing the clothes Cassus had seen him in those few weeks back when this all began. He'd removed his jacket and most of his medals, but for some reason kept his fancy boots on. "Well, it was all I could find," he said with a laugh. "Didn't you have your sidearm with you?" Cassus asked, thinking he remembered the prince having it. "Of course. I just never loaded the damn thing. It's more for looks than anything." Cassus sighed as the prince said that and really felt like he should have known. The prince stepped up, though, surprising Cassus with a hug. It's good to see an old face. I was worried you'd all been butchered by the pirates." He pulled back, and Cassus was glad for that as he took a gasp of air, covering his mouth and nose once more. "Come now, Captain. Haven't you ever smelled unwashed, dirty sailors? Being a Navy man, you're surely familiar with that. This can't be that different." The prince laughed. "I kept my crew to a very strict hygiene regimen, so no, I'm not familiar with the smell." He did try to smile as he worked to ignore the smell, but it wasn't easy. "So you're alive, and yet we're still on the pirates' ship. What sort of people are we dealing with here, Captain? Their attack was ferocious. Have they been making you eat any of our dead crew?" the prince asked with concern. "What? No." Cassus frowned at the question, unsure where the prince got that idea. "Well then, how badly have they tortured you? I don't see any scars that weren't already there," he mentioned as he tilted his head side to side while examining Cassus. "They haven't tortured me. There were some threats early on, but they've mostly been treating me well. Though I have Cassus coughed as he tried to think about how to phrase what had been happening with Andromeda. But to his surprise, the prince spoke first. "What? Are they like the Phexians? Don't tell me you've been out there enjoying the hospitality while I've been stuck in here without so much as a proper meal." Cassus blinked for a moment, mouth hanging open. That's not how I'd phrase it," he stammered as the prince groaned. You rascal! Taking advantage of your head start while I was locked away? I suppose I can't blame you. You always did have a knack for making the best of a bad situation. The prince laughed and slapped Cassus on the back, making him stumble forward for a moment. Your Royal Highness, this is not a game, Cassus gasped out. It most certainly is. I've got a number in mind. Tell me if I'm close. It's been a few weeks. You need to sleep, eat, and recover, so I'm going to guess 32. Am I close? As he grinned at Cassus, the captain took a moment. 32, no. What do you think this is? I'm not some toy being used non-stop! He gasped out, now getting very exasperated with the prince who just laughed. Ah, you need more recovery time then? Ah, well, like I said, you are older. I just thought you were in better shape for your age. 15 then? He tried and Cassus shook his head. 8? He wouldn't give up. 3! Cassus finally blurted out. Why are we talking about this? And what do you know of being captured by Phyrexians? Those rumors are all true. The prince cut him off. I've seen the journals and read the reports. Sure, not all of them get into it, but the Phyrexian women are very interested in us Desvian men, and you know it. Haven't you seen the reports of what our women do to their men as well? It's perfect, really. You get all the fun you want and don't need to worry about repercussions. Well, rarely. Why do you think some of the older families let their children stay in Phyrexian hands for years after their capture? Because they don't want to come home. Cassus was staring open-mouthed at the prince once more. He couldn't help but rub the sides of his muzzle in disbelief at what he was hearing. But the tales of Vice Admiral Parvel. Oh, sure, there are some captives who do that sort of thing. Mostly you military types who get all dark and moody when captured, walking along the estate grounds writing depressing poetry and musing about war and philosophy. But the nobles like myself, we have a more pleasure-oriented approach to captivity. I can't believe I've been missing out this whole time. So what 3? Their leader, Andromeda, he started. Is she the massive redhead? Very fiery! I like the passion. I'm hoping that armor enhances her size, or she might be a bit manly for my taste. Though I bet she's left you gasping, eh? Cassus let out a grunt as the prince elbowed him in the side, which he hadn't expected. And that black-haired one? She seems quiet, but I bet there's more to her than meets the eye. Cassus didn't know what to say. What about the third one? I can tell from your expression I'm right about that little one. So who's the third? Loretta. He started, but was immediately cut off by the prince. Cousin Loretta. No! Now I know why she didn't respond to my birthday letters. She had her eyes on someone more decorated. Then again, what's life without taking some risks, huh? He laughed and slapped Cassus on the back once more. But, Cassus started while the prince just kept on going. Do they have any extra surprises down there? Or are we pretty functional? I don't know if it was the fact that the architects were into this sort of thing too, or if evolution is lazy, but I have yet to meet a Xeno I couldn't have fun with. The Germo are a tad tricky, but surprisingly skillful if you know how to go about what you're doing. Nothing. Extra, was all Cassus could stammer. Wonderful. And that soft-looking skin they have. I bet that's an interesting sensation. And they've taken to you, old man? You haven't been letting our race down by not doing your part, have you? Gotta put in a good show. Cassus didn't know how to get the prince to stop. He didn't even know how to deal with what he was hearing in general. Well, now that I know what's been going on outside, I can freely leave and get acquainted with this new species. I'm going to be king someday. I should make sure our two peoples get along, you know. The prince laughed, and Cassus was hit by the horrible realization that this man would indeed become king. This was his prince, the man who'd rule the kingdom, in charge of all Desvians. Cassus had never been more worried for the future of his people in his life. Wait, he finally gasped out. They'll use you as leverage. He tried, but the prince shrugged and laughed. For what? A mountain of gold? I'm worth it, you know. And they do that anyway with me in here. I might as well enjoy being leveraged while I'm at it. Eh? Eh? He nudged Cassus in the ribs again and laughed. Before you go out there. Cassus tried to start. Do you know the location of your brother? Hevik? I'd assume he's on Thastus like always, dabbling in art. I think he just enjoys dabbling in art students. He grinned and wiggled his brows. Or do you mean Reginad? No, neither I. Verisan? No, Favian? This isn't a guessing game, Cassus blurted out. Well, I guess I would have lost if it was, the prince replied with a laugh. But I think I named them all off anyway. Cassus sighed, rubbing his forehead for a moment. Persis. Ooh, I always forget about the little runt. Though he is pretty amusing at times. I know that there were times when you'd sneak him off with you at his request. Had you done that before ordering us to the nebula? Cassus asked, wanting to try and either confirm or end a suspicion of his. Well no, I hadn't. But I don't know where he got off to last time. It's hard to keep track of him. I do think he was with Mother, though. Last I heard at any rate. He's so strange. Did you know that he dresses himself? No servants! Look how well that's turned out in here! The prince waved around the room filled with garbage, and then at his messy clothing. Well, Cassus was about to try to explain, but the prince just went on. So these humans, they're called, right? What sort of style do they like? I bet that leader likes to be on top of things, eh? He laughed as he jabbed Cassus with his elbow again. Look, Cassus tried. Do they have anything to enhance the experience? What? Cassus asked, now confused. You know. Well, maybe you don't. Do they have apothecaries with herbal remedies? The prince was acting like this was crucial information he needed to know. Oh, yes, they have drugs, Cassus answered, his original train of thought entirely derailed. What are they like? Some crew members take mild stims, mood enhancers, energy boosters. Loretta swears by one that makes boring tasks feel joyful. There's another that helps people stay active and focused for hours, legal in most Confederacy space. Oh, those sound wonderful. I like these humans already. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get drugs as the crown prince? Everyone talks about setting an example and such, but I'm sure my father experimented. He still might. After all, look at how many brothers and sisters I have. But Mother never seems tired, does she? Nope. Always happy and relaxed. Maybe she's got some drugs herself. Cassus stared openly at the prince. He started, but at this point was no longer sure what he had to say. Maybe ordering you to the nebula was the best decision I'll have made. Mostly I was worried about being bored to tears until Father dies and I get more responsibilities. Then again, I was also worried he'd die too young and I wouldn't get to have so much fun. But it seems like a life among pirates is just the ticket. Do you think their leader will let me pick from her crew? I suppose there's only one way to find out. The prince happily opened the vault door then, walking out without a care in the universe, it seemed. Cassus could only stumble after him, feeling dazed and confused. The prince raised his arms as he got outside then. Hello there, fair pirate queen. I forgot to ask Cassus. Are you a queen? Baroness, Andromeda replied. Baroness? That's not bad. And I suppose before long you might as well be the crown princess consort. Is that a thing? A consort of some kind? Whatever it's called. Cassus couldn't shut his mouth at this point. He stood in the door, hands pressing against his muzzle in horror as he listened to his prince, the man who would be king. What? Was all Andromeda could reply with a laugh. My friend Captain Deveros has informed me that he's been holding out on me. That I've really been keeping myself from a wonderful time from the sounds of things. Why didn't you tell me you were interested in Desvian biology? I could have given you a much better lesson at it than that old man. He jerked his thumb towards Cassus, who couldn't even gasp in shock anymore, but he noticed the prince's long tail waving around happily. Oh, it's been hellish living in that vault all this time. It's a total mess. And I dare say by my captain's reaction earlier I'm in need of a good shower, but at least from here we can move forward. Joining our two species together in harmony, hopefully several times today. I've been locked in a metal box talking to shadows. Not exactly thrilling. What? Andromeda gasped out, laughing harder now as she clearly found this all amusing. But Cassus had pressed his hands to his face, trying not to remember to breathe as he listened to the future Desvian king. I do like your red hair, and the small one I'm sure can perform admirably, but I am hoping that there will be a greater selection to choose from later. I'm a bit more used to a buffet-style selection. Andromeda couldn't stop laughing for a moment, and Cassus desperately hoped he was dreaming. This was a nightmare. Or maybe he was dead. Maybe she'd killed him that first day, and this was all his experience in hell. Well, I might let my guard captain here have a go, she said, and Cassus then heard Titus speak up. I don't know if he's my type. in English, which the prince wouldn't know. Oh, that's a big one. Oh, dark flesh? That's very exotic. I don't normally go for muscles, but I might make an exception. And interesting that she lacks hair on her head. Well, that's because she is a he, Andromeda replied in Desvian. Ooh. Well, I can't say I'd go that route naturally, but if I'm your captive, I suppose experimentation will be expected. I do hope you don't mind being the bottom. By now, Cassus was softly crying as he heard the pirates around the room burst into laughter. Slowly, Cassus sat down on the edge of the vault door, having trouble breathing as he truly began to realize what Andromeda had meant about his people following monarchs blindly. This couldn't possibly be normal, could it? But then he began to think back about rumors he'd heard of the king and his father before him. Cassus was having trouble breathing. Well, you stink, so before we get into that, let's get you to the showers. I won't have my whip with me, but I think a wet towel will work just fine. I have no idea what that one word was or what you mean, but it sounds deliciously naughty. I'm in, was the prince's reply. Cassus listened to the laughter in the room get loud before it slowly faded away. Maybe if he was quick, he could activate the vault door and then get into position for the heavy metal to crush his head. It would all be over. Are you okay? He heard Junko softly ask, and he opened his eyes, sitting up now as he looked at her and then around the room. The human techs and Stahl were still there, but Andromeda and her guards had all left. That is the future ruler of my people, he gasped softly. I'm sorry, Junko replied as she reached down, taking Cassus's hand as she helped him get back up to his feet. Once upright, Cassus just shook his head. How did I never see this before? Was I blind to it? Was I kept in the dark? He had no words for it anymore. I hate to ask in light of these events, but what he mentioned about her becoming a consort, could she claim rightful connection to the throne if they... Junko quietly inquired. No, Cassus replied firmly. He has to marry a Desvian noble, not to mention he's her captive. No one would believe the sincerity. Junko nodded at that. I thought so, but I had to ask. It would save us a lot of trouble if it did. With that, she gently pat Cassus on the shoulder. I am sorry, though. Now you see why Andromeda isn't fond of monarchy as a government. I'm beginning to understand, Cassus miserably admitted. I mean, really, their only qualification to rule is who their parents are. So, it makes sense as a survival trait that they'd need lots of kids. Being, active is likely just good practice. Cassus could tell she was trying to comfort him, but it wasn't helping. Then he remembered his niece, who he hadn't thought about in some time. All those suitors he'd tried to set her up with. Junko, my niece. What about her? She asked, sounding a bit nervous. Is she still safe? Yeah, she's with the other nobles. They've been treated well. They're well fed and clothed and all that, though maybe bored at times. I know Andromeda let them go to the colony fleet with an escort. Your niece didn't join them. Cassus nodded. Could you let me know if my family pays her ransom? I want a chance to ask that she stay here, and not go back to the sort of life I'm suddenly realizing she'd be living. In fact, could I see her? You can inform Andromeda she's my niece if need be. I no longer care. He could see Junko was surprised, but after a moment she nodded. Sure, whatever you need, she promised. Thank you. He felt slightly better as he began to think about what this might mean. The prince was only the future leader of his people if he survived all this. No, he was sworn to protect him, even if he was, Cassus sighed. Could we go back? I could use a drink. Junko nodded and began to lead him away from the vault and towards the way they came. Once they were back on the tram, Stahl and Junko were both staring at him. Did Stahl know what had transpired? For some reason he felt a deeper shame that a military commander was disciplined, as Stahl had now seen the sort of leader Cassus was sworn to. We have all these stories! He suddenly started talking, unsure where he was going with it. About the Paragons. You likely hear me mention them from time to time. He looked at Junko, who nodded. They are supposed to uphold the virtues of our people. They're an example to us all, be they noble or common-born. All proud, shining examples of what the best of us can become, about how we can serve our kingdom. I never dared dream I become one, but obviously I hoped. I mean, I became the captain for the Crown Prince. I likely would have become an admiral if I stuck with him. He took a deep breath. I spent my life studying tactics, command, leadership, all of it, and now I discover what sort of man my prince is. He slowly shook his head then and looked back at Junko. I hear many of the crew mention some man. Lucifer? Is he a human paragon? A Confederate paragon? Maybe I should start praying to him instead. Ah, he's not exactly a paragon. He's also known as the Lightbringer, and the Morning Star. And also, Satan. Cassis blinked at that. No, I read a bit about your bigger religions. Satan is some red monster thing. Very evil, corrupts and kills and tortures. Now he was confused. Yes, Junko said as he could tell she was trying to think on how to phrase her words. Many versions of Christianity believe this. But the biggest religion in the Confederacy, which was 35% of people before the war, and now something like 52%, I think, are Satanists. What? They sacrifice people and use blood offerings and rituals? He gasped out. No, she said firmly. Those are old-style Satanists. Sorry, I'm referring to the modern Church of Lucifer, the Lightbringer and champion of truth and free will. It's a pretty long name. A few centuries ago, a small movement began saying that, well, there are two main forms. One half says that after God, the Christian God, that is. He is the ruler of several religions, yes? Cassis asked, and she nodded. Well, supposedly after he made the universe, he set everything into motion and created his servants to watch and observe what unfolded. Then the angels sought to gain power from humans by tricking them into worshiping God, and they'd use those prayers to get stronger somehow, I'm not sure. Lucifer rebelled, believing early humans should be left alone and that the angels would corrupt the purity of the earth. They fought. He lost because the greedy angels outnumbered him, but he always tried to bring enlightenment to humans and inspire them to question everything. She hesitated then as she thought. Then, the other half is sort of the same, but a bit more literal about how God made the universe, and was very weak when it was over. The angels set up the Garden of Eden to force Adam and Eve, the two first humans according to the faith. And, well, the angels wanted them to essentially be prayer slaves. They'd worship God and make him strong again. But Lucifer knew that God wanted humans to have free will, and despite what the angels had told Adam and Eve about the fruit of knowledge, he got Eve to eat it and break the direct hold the angels had over them. This sparked the war. The angels still win in this version, but they hold God captive, harvesting the prayers of the blind believers to keep their power. They commit terrible, horrible things to make humans either believe or to try and kill those who don't, while Lucifer still tries to break people from this slavery. Cassis blinked as he tried to process this from what he'd learned of human religions. Why? See, they think that God loves life. He made it throughout the universe. And if God made life and loves life, why would he punish us for what we do? Why would he care about shellfish, for example? Or why would he command people to kill each other? They feel like he wouldn't, and that he'd want us to have free will. But the other religions from that same core all talk about how he forbid Adam and Eve from eating the fruit of knowledge and gaining self-awareness and free will. So they argue that's all lies the angels told as they encouraged people to blindly believe. And they think Jesus was an attempt from God to be reborn as a mortal, but that the angels corrupted the message and made sure he was killed. I'm not sure if you remember the bits about Jesus. Sort of, Cassis ventured. He died to pay for the sins of man? He tried to remember the text. Essentially. And he told people to be good to one another, and in general be nice. But then, well, it's really complicated. But essentially his religion didn't end up doing that for a few thousand years, which the Satanists argued was more of the angels meddling again. Anyway, the Satanists, the modern ones, think Lucifer and Jesus were friends, and Lucifer was working to mentor Jesus, but the angels killed him young and made sure his message of equality and women's right and stuff died with him. Or took a long time to resurface, I guess. I'm not a Satanist, so it's kind of hard for me to remember all this. But the big thing is they believe in freedom, free will, and that life is to be enjoyed. Oh, and they're big proponents of science and freedom of religion, which is odd for a religion and probably why it was only found in a small section of human space, which just happened to be the capital of the Confederacy. She shrugged. That all sounds complicated. Cassis finally responded, and she nodded. It is. It really is, she agreed. So, these Satanists don't believe in sacrifice or ritualistic murder? He asked. No, she confirmed. She stopped and corrected herself. Unless they catch someone forcing their own religion upon someone else. That's the only thing Satanists aren't supposed to allow. They're told to kill anyone who tries to force their religion upon others. So that's probably also why the modern Satanists never got very big, because they weren't aggressive recruiters. Very relaxed about it. Happy to talk if you're interested, but otherwise didn't bother people who weren't religious or were members of other religions. Except vegans. Who? Cassis asked, wondered if that was a religion or a species. They feel that eating meat was what gave humans the ability to reason, so anyone who won't eat meat isn't really human. Or they're subhuman, maybe? Basically, they view vegans as also animals. And slaves. Oh! She noticed Cassis's confusion. Vegans are humans who only eat plant matter. Nothing involving animals. Meat, dairy, honey, anything animal-related they won't touch. So they're very poor? He asked. But you said they won't touch. So even if they could afford it, they wouldn't? She nodded. Humans are very strange. And very complex, he said simply. But this Lucifer, they believe he brings light. Enlightenment more than actual light. Which, if you hear the words in English, makes more sense. They think he's a champion of freedom, and I'm sure you're aware Andromeda worships freedom. I don't know that she's a practicing Satanist, but most of the crew is. Oh, Stahl, for example. She motioned to the officer, who perked up. I hear my name, and I've been hearing Lucifer and Satanists get thrown around a lot, he replied in English. Cassis has been asking about the religion, Junko replied. Yes, I am considering new faith. Mine has not impressed me, Cassis replied. Well, the faith is open to all. I'd be happy to teach you more about it if you like, Stahl offered. Does anything said about rulers? He tried in English. Do you mean do Satanists have guidelines for how to pick leaders? Stahl ventured, and Cassis nodded. Well, they believe only the best should rule. That a leader must be the best of the best, so to speak. Is this related to your prince being a man? He followed what up with a word Cassis didn't know. He looked to Junko, who coughed softly. He's wondering if this is related to your prince's promiscuity, she explained in Desvian. Yes, Cassis said flat out. Well, Stahl replied, that's actually allowed in our religion. It's one of the core, rules of our religion. Be open and confident with your body. Do you know the word consenting? Cassis nodded. What two consenting adults do is up to them. We don't see anything wrong with sleeping around, but it's not mandatory or anything like that. I'm a bit more focused on the aspects of our religion that speak to defending anyone of any faith who is being. He used a word Cassis didn't know. Persecuted, Junko translated as Stahl went on. Especially if they're being targeted because of their own beliefs. Learning is key. We do everything we can to promote learning and science, while guarding freedom at all costs. This is another reason why the Confederacy always hated the Congos, he mentioned. Then he started talking a bit too quickly and used words Cassis wasn't familiar with, so he looked at Junko. He's explaining how prostitution, drugs, and many other things are illegal in the conglomerate, and how a war against these things does more harm than good to the people. Both prostitution and drugs are encouraged by the faith. I'll say this in Desvian so he doesn't get mad at me, but I'm not a believer because it's still a religion. They have some odd ideas about things that I won't get into, but they go into detail about sex and relationships and power, which I've seen firsthand with Andromeda. She believes that what I do with her is entirely acceptable because of her power. So long as she makes an attempt to make me enjoy it, she thinks it's okay. It's complicated. I'm sure you never expected anything like that first night to happen. Cassis sighed out. Actually, the Phexians do it to us, and we do it to them constantly. Really? She asked, now surprised. Well, I didn't know it was constant until the prince told me. But why do you think I didn't object much? I had lost the battle. I was her prisoner. My honor demanded I perform whatever task she wished of me, so long as it didn't directly harm my country or my king. I had heard rumors of it happening with prisoners, but the prince informs me not only does it happen constantly, but that it's sort of encouraged and enjoyed. I suppose what he's doing isn't... I'm just upset that is going to be our king, Cassis admitted. The way he went on about it, he's looking forward to whatever happens next. Of that I can assure you. I just hope it wasn't too bad for you, Junko said, and Cassis shrugged. I was shocked, but I would lie if I said I didn't enjoy some of it. I just feel guilty, he admitted. Well, Loretta sure doesn't, Junko said, which made Cassis laugh. And Andromeda really is good at what she does. I certainly wish I had more of a choice in the matter, but, well, yeah, you know how good she is. I don't need to explain it to you. At least with the prince here now, she'll leave me alone, Cassis said. But Junko gave him a look and he felt a sense of dread. No, please. I'm just saying, it's a distinct possibility. I wouldn't put it past her. She likes you. Cassis groaned, leaning back in his chair on the tram as he rubbed his face. Please no! Not with the prince! He exclaimed with woe heavy in his voice. Well, we both know that is entirely up to Andromeda. Maybe if you get in good with her, she'll let you make requests, but, well, you better get in good with her. Junko was smiling a bit, clearly finding it hard not to be slightly amused by all this. Was this her plan all along? To torment me into doing what she wants? Cassis asked, suddenly thinking of the possibility, but Junko shook her head. Oh no, Andromeda doesn't use sex like that. She's just out to enjoy herself, and enjoy herself she will. There's no stopping her, though it seems like your future king is perfectly okay with that. Junko jibed a bit, and Cassis groaned once more. All my years of service. The men who've died in battle for our king! Do they even care? Or is it just an excuse for our nobles to run off and screw Fexians? Or for Fexians to come screw our women? What's the point of it all? He thought for a moment and then pointed to Junko. Our borders with the Fexians have changed 10 times in the last 15 years, but only by tiny amounts. He collapsed back against the chair then, rubbing his face. Junko was at a loss for words, it seemed. Well, maybe it's not as bad as you think, she finally tried. Could you talk with the captive nobles? He asked. I need to know. Do any of them get schooled in leadership at all? I want to know what the leaders of my country are really like. I've been ignorant for too long. I need to know. I'll see what I can find out, Junko promised. Cassis was worried that he'd been fighting his whole life now to benefit a ruling class that didn't care one bit about anything but their own pleasure. He'd never have thought it possible before, but as he thought on the stories of the paragons that were drilled into him from birth, he realized none of them involved higher nobility, common-born and low nobles like himself only. Where were their sacrifices in the history books? Where were their great contributions? He wasn't sure if this Lucifer was right for him, but he certainly wanted to get enlightened now.